Là, aste, nous gagnons Tambou Enkò, une conversation longue après bat Tambou-la avec Larènn Vodou, Kalindah Laveaux. Et puis après, ça commence à 6h30 jusqu'à 7h30. Nous gagnons la table créole à Chinbo, compte aujourd'hui et les autres fois. So now we have from 5:30 to 6:30, we'll have Tambou Revisited, an extended conversation on drumming with Voodoo Queen Kalindah Laveaux. And then from 6:30 to 7:30, la table créole à Chinbo, stories from today and long ago. Là, moi, les présenter vous autres, Larènn Vodou, Kalindah Laveaux, et puis aussi nous gagnons nos vice-présidents, Clif Laurent, et tous les deux, il va parler après rôle Tambou-la, ça jouer en donnant la culture et en donnant la musique et pour nos corps. C'est pour vous autres. Merci.
Thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to our second event of the day. I know that you enjoyed the first one. So the second one is another very special event, Tambou Revisited. Okay, so we are going to be having a conversation, an extended conversation. For those of you who made the showing of Tambou yesterday, you saw an introduction and a performance by none other than the Voodoo Queen Kalindah Laveaux, who I'm also so proud to say is my godmother. When you're in when you're a member of African traditional spiritual systems, you're brought in by a mentor who initiates you, which is referred to as your godparent. Or in Kouri-Vini and in the Français Louisiana, it's a marraine. So this is my marraine, Voodoo Queen Kalindah Laveaux. We are going to continue the conversation that we saw you talk about on yesterday prior to the showing of the film. Now, I know you didn't get an opportunity to see the film, but we're going to make sure that that happens. So for right now, and I think most people here actually, maybe with the exception of two, were actually here. So they all saw this presentation. So what I want to talk about first is you talked about how the drum is the heartbeat. So I want to first start this off by having you explain the connection between the drum beat, the heartbeat, and breath and breathing, because you talked about how, if you find yourselves in times of your heart is elevated, if you begin to drum. And you talked about how the pulse can sometimes will start to kind of match, slow down, basically. I'll let you take it from there.
Okay. So when we're dealing with ceremonies, such as the case, is with Voodoo, or whether we're dealing with music, the drum is the heartbeat, meaning it's the pulse, it's the life of the ceremony, it's the life of the music. So if for some reason the drum stops, the pulse stops, and I'm not talking about just the drum set itself leaving or just any drum leaving, I mean the pulse of the music. If that stops, then it dies. Just the same as if your own heart stops for too long, you would go into brain damage and you would eventually, how do they say it online now? You would be unalived. You would, you wouldn't be able to exist without that heartbeat. So it is the battery of the ceremony. It's the battery of the music. So when we drum, or even when we're in ceremony, or we're witnessing a musical performance, our heartbeat and our breath will kind of slow down or speed up to match that music, to match that drum beat, to match that rhythm. So if a person is, let's say you're very anxious, or, maybe you've just gotten done, being really active, and you go into ceremony and the rhythm is slow and steady, your breathing will begin to slow down, your heart rate will slow down, your pulse will slow down, and you'll begin to match what's happening with the drums. And vice versa. You could be you know, sitting still, you could be laying down, you could be sedentary, and you hear some upbeat music. And you can almost go from a laying position to a standing position instantly and begin to dance with no warm up, no stretching, but your heartbeat, your breathing has already begun to prepare you. And we see it all the time here. I'm in New Orleans, I live in the Treme, so there's always a second line. And we don't always know when they're going to come because sometimes they're very spontaneous. And I could really be on the couch, almost asleep. I hear those drums, I jump up. I don't even know if the outfit I'm wearing is good enough, but then I go run out and I dance. And sometimes I follow them all the way to the end, you know, but that's the power of the drum, you know.
So what you're describing almost sounds like then a trance-like state, or something that is innate either in the rhythm or either within us, or some magical fusion of the two that compels one to become a part of that, to participate in some way. Can you talk about what that connection is that makes us want to do that when we hear that beat?
So it is innate in us, and there's something about, you know, our ancestors, they understood the power of repetition. Hence, you know, call and response music. We understand that very well when we sing call and response, but that also happens with the drums. One drum will call, the other one will respond. But either way, any repetitive rhythm, it begins to lull you into a state, especially when we do the 6/8 rhythm, which is very common in Voodoo ritual, Voodoo ceremony. It causes you to kind of rock back and forth. It's very soothing. It's very natural for babies and children. And it is a motion like water. It helps you to flow just like water. Now, that's definitely innate for us because we're over 70% water. When we connect to the spirit realm, that is a realm of water, the astral plane. The land of dreams is a realm of water. So to go into a trance state, to dream, to rock, to float, all of those come from the same place within us. And so basically the rhythm just connects to something that's very natural to us. And we're able to express ourselves with, you know, whether we realize it or not. Sometimes we don't know when our toe is tapping. We don't know when we begin to sway or we begin to dance. You know, it's something that we do sometimes without realizing it. But it's because that drum has connected to something that is natural within us. And the first drum rhythm that you learn is the same rhythm as your heartbeat. You know, I didn't bring a drum in here with me. It's
I was just about to ask if you had. But just so now I can speak to this. This is my expertise. So you said 6/8. So that would mean that we have 6/8 notes in a measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the rhythm that we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You said something very interesting in the video that I want to have you speak to. And that is that lots of times in our history, we being people of African descent, enslaved people of African descent did not have access to drums because of laws that were passed against it, because I think because our ancestors enslavers would have known that maybe not the full significance of it, maybe, I don't know, but they would have known that it was something that was important to us. So can you explain that process, the process of loss and what we did to compensate for it?
Okay, so one thing about the enslavers, they understood that our enslaved ancestors, if you want to turn someone into a slave, you must strip them of that which gives them any source of power and any source of positive identity. So the drum, just like voodoo, was taken away. Voodoo and the drum can tell us who we are. It will tell us who our ancestors are. You know, it will give us a sense of pride because we understand that now we belong to something more than just enslaved community that we're a part of right now. We have a lineage, and with this drum comes power. It becomes a form of communication that our enslavers didn't understand. So we're actually able to communicate with each other. It's an actual language. It's a drum language. We're also able to communicate with spirit, which is most important. So in Voodoo, you're contacting, you know, ancestors. You're also contacting the Voodoo, which we also consider the divine forces of nature, la loi. So to be able to communicate using this drum, how do you go against somebody who can communicate with the sun? How do you go against somebody who can communicate with the rain or the thunder or the lightning? That's the connection that we had. And it's not so much about us being all powerful. It's about us understanding how to respect, coexist, and have a relationship with all the divine aspects around us. You know, there's God, but there's many ways that God and divinity manifests. And so we're simply acknowledging the divinity within everything that is created by the divine. And we have a relationship with it. And a big part of that relationship is through the drum. And so because of that, they saw for some reason it was powerful. And most of all, they did not understand that language. So we had to, because there were certain points in our history where we could not have a drum, it was illegal, it would be taken away from us, there would be a penalty. Our drum, first of all, we would carve out, you know, the tree trunk, and we would keep the cowhide or the goat skin separately. And when it got time to play, we may go slip it on, play, do what we had to do, and then quickly take it off. They should never be seen together. And then also, we learned how to put that drum in our hands. We learned how to put that drum in our feet. We learned how to put that drum in our voice. I mean, even if you listen to hip hop today, if you transcribe the rhythm of what a lot of those guys are saying, from the rhythm of the way that they're rapping to the way that, you know, if you take a drum and transcribe it to a drum, it's a very complex rhythm. And I don't know, you know, maybe a lot of people may or may not like Jay-Z, but he's a very good example. If you play the rhythm of what he speaks on a drum, it's a very good drum solo. So we learn many different ways. Also tap dancing, you know, the drums in our feet, you know, they kind of, you know, now it's presented as something that kind of, I guess, puts a bad taste in some people's mouth because it's associated with a lot of, you know, shows and different old movies that, you know,
minstrel soul shows.
Sure, you know, that we don't look at that and we don't see ourselves and we don't see something to be proud of because the way it's presented. But the actual art of tap dancing is great. The body becomes a drum, you know. So we had to do that, even to take, you know, a large stick or large cane and tap it on the ground. You know, we have many shakers. We have, you know, tambourines, you know, even, you know, in Zydeco with the frottoir, you know, that's the percussion. And in not only Zydeco, but in many early jazz bands, there was no drum set. There was only this, you know, there was only scratching. That was the drum. So we never lost our drum. We may not have had it physically at certain times, but we can't lose it. It became a part of who we are naturally. And then later we were able to reclaim it in different ways. You know, even when you look at here in New Orleans with the second line bands, these are, you know, military instrumentation, you know. So you have the brass, and then you also have, you know, the snare, you have the tuba, And that brings us back to our drums as well. And that's the core of what you hear from New Orleans. That's the core of it, you know, that you know, journey from voodoo drum into our bodies and back into actual instrumentation.
You said something I love. It reminds me of a moment that I think we all laugh at from the movie Get Up, which is the biopic of James Brown.
Yes.
There's a scene in that movie, and I think other musicians can probably relate to it. And he was asking the guys, you know, what you playing? The drum. He said, I'm playing the drum. And then he goes to like the other horn guys, and I'm probably recalling it incorrectly, but the gist of it is
You're
he goes to the other people who had a guitar. He said, what's that instrument you have? It's a guitar. I said, no, it's not. It's a drum.
It's a drum.
He said, no, it's a guitar. He said, no, it's a drum. He goes to the horn section. He's like, what's this instrument you got? And they all caught on by this point. It's a drum. Everything that we're doing is rhythmic. It's got to be rhythmic because the rhythm is what drives the rest of the music in that way.
Yes.
I thought that was interesting. I love that. I thought about that when I watched the performance that you did yesterday.
I love that when you brought up the James Brown scene. I love that scene because he so perfectly explains what we've been doing all along. Even when we look at, you know, piano players, and, you know, don't get it twisted, jazz is a Creole music, you know. So even if you look at like McCoy Tyner, he's playing a drum with that piano. His melody is great. All of his voicings are great, but, you know, he can play pentatonic scales all day, but his rhythm, that's what's driving everything, you know. And that's been the case. When we look at our blues, we look at Zydeco especially, we look at jazz, we look at spirituals. All of these things are driven by the rhythm, no matter what the instrument is.
Yeah. I'm not trying to show off, but I mean, you make me want to give an example of people who might need one. So even in you know, in voice, you have a regular 5-note scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do. You can do that just as it's been done. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do. But isn't it more interesting to maybe go do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do, or do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do. What gives it? I've taken the exact same 5-note scale and done it rhythmically in so many different ways, and each of them had a different feel. Each of them probably evoked a different feeling, which is the power in the rhythm, right? Which is, I think, what you're saying, what you're getting at. I'm loving this. This is going a direction I didn't anticipate it going.
There's a video of Bobby McFerrin doing the same thing. He just took the regular, you know, scale, and he experimented with many different rhythms. And I mean, the possibilities are endless. You can change everything just with rhythm, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So you said something about the way that the instrument, once the enslavers saw the power that it wielded, even not fully understanding it. You mentioned how it was stripped away. So I want to, in a way, tie this in with the movie, because this is, you know, I mentioned yesterday, guys, that Luke, the director, the film writer and director of Tambou, you know, I don't think that he knew the vastness and the depth of the film that he created. I don't think he knew, you know, he knew he was touching on loss of language. He knew he was touching on loss of culture. He knew that he was touching on gentrification, bless you. But I don't think that what he didn't realize was that the role that this really plays in our lives. And so you mentioned it having been stripped. There's a scene, just to sum up for you what the film is about. The film is about this Creole grandfather who used to have this band, and he was the drummer of the band. And he he's kind of behind on bills, and his daughter has been really pretty much footing the bill. She's been supporting him, and she just now at this point can no longer afford to do it. So she and her son, who's 10 years old, who is his progenitor, right? Or not progenitor, his what do you call it? His descendant, his line, someone of his lineage who will continue his lineage to going on. They come up from Oklahoma to pack him up and move him back with him, but he doesn't want to move away from Louisiana, from New Orleans in general. It's where their family is connected. And so what he does in order to kind of develop a relationship between his grandson and himself, and in order to as a last ditch effort to try to stay in that home, in that city that has been his home forever, he goes and panhandles. He goes out on the street doing what he used to do, playing the tambou to get some change to make up for it. This is a spoiler for those of you who haven't seen it. I think everybody here actually was here yesterday, just about. Spoiler alert, he doesn't meet his goal. But what he finds instead is a relationship between he and his grandson that needed to happen anyway. What he finds is a connection that was probably more important to him than staying in the place where he was cultivated. So I want to talk a little bit about that relationship that he had with his grandson, and I want to read a statistic that I found for you guys. I was looking for one in general, but I think this is more befitting because this is an article that is done by, oh God, what is this source? AAMC, oh gosh, I'm not sure what the source is right now, but the AAMC, you can check it out. And it says the tragedy of Black youth suicide. Black children ages 5 to 12 are twice as likely to die by suicide as their white peers, and Black teen suicides are growing at shocking rates. There's another part, gets into a few more numbers. Suicide rates among Black youth in the United States are growing at an alarming rate. From 2018 to 2021, the racial group saw the largest increase in suicides among people 10 to 24 years old, they found that was Black individuals, with an increase of 37%. From 2000 to 2020, Black youth ages 10 to 19 also experienced the largest increase in suicide rates at a shocking 78%. And in research study among the youngest children, ages 5 to 12, Black youth were approximately 2 times more likely to die by suicide than their white counterparts. I'll stop there. I bring that up because it's clear that studies suggest that people of color, whether Creole or African American, the rates, it seems like when I was coming up, and I'm raised, in the 80s and 90s, we didn't hear about many people of color, taking their own lives. And I can imagine even further back, I've heard my grandmother and stuff talk about it. That's not something that culturally we have seen. And so what I want to talk about now is, do you find that it's beneficial? And I'm taking this off of a personal conversation that you and I had a while ago. And from what I understand is that, therapy, all these things are great, and they can greatly add to our mental health. But you seem to suggest that, especially in the case of people of color, that a therapeutic exercise that we can use is definitely drumming. Can you talk a little bit about how that could potentially, the small act like drumming, that's big in and of itself, spiritually, how can that contribute to, thank you, Tanise, Association of American Medical Colleges. Sorry, that was the source. Sorry. How can that help aid our mental health?
Okay. So I'm going to speak in the context of the tradition of Voodoo. For those who you don't really know much about Voodoo, or maybe you're not so open-minded, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a reference point so that you can understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. So when we look at our traumas and trauma in general, therapy can do a lot. You need to have a safe space to go and discuss things, and you need someone who is not in the trauma with you or a part of your trauma or the one who contributed to your trauma to help you sort through this. Therapy can be very valuable, but it does tend to take quite a while before you begin to see certain results. And for many people, there's still a very heavy energetic component there that cannot really be penetrated. So within Voodoo, we see everything in the context of spirit. We believe that these Voodoo, these Laveaux, these spirits live within us. They're a part of us because we are connected to nature. We are connected to the divine. So with that being said, we can do things to communicate and connect with these different parts of ourselves, these spirits, these divine forces of nature that also reside inside of us. So some of the ways we can do that would be drumming, dancing, singing, and there's quite a few different healing modalities. But you begin to sound, percussion, and even pitch that begins to shift and balance these different houses within us that holds this different energies or different voodoo or different Laveaux or different spirits. So in doing that, once we become balanced or we begin to balance, now we start thinking clearly, because the thing about trauma, everything is surrounded with anxiety. If you have a thought about something that happened in the past, or if something in the present moment takes you back to that past moment, the first thing is there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of fear. So that person must be disarmed. They need a safe space, they need calm right then. So what we do with drama, what we do by any of those ceremonial activities that we do, they're all designed to help you to, for a moment, escape that to escape that kind of temporary anxiety and to just go back to a place that is actually the real you. So many of us are not, we don't really have a connection to who we really are and who we would be if we had never been touched by those traumas. Just imagine how we would express ourselves or how we would show up differently if we never had the different traumas that we encountered, through childhood, through young adulthood, and even things we don't necessarily remember for ourselves because it's stored in the ancestral memory, So those memories, that energy is actually stored in our cells. So whenever our parents, grandparents, and so on procreated, even though they went through the trauma, maybe they had to be in survival mode just to keep moving, but those memories, that trauma, those emotions, that energy, it's still there. So then when they procreate and they create us, that's stored in our cells just the same. And so these things can be handled by way of ritual means, and drumming is a part of that. So that's the, I guess, kind of the more like the larger answer for it. But if we just look at it in a very simple form, anything meditative can calm you. Anything meditative and repetitive can begin to balance you, can begin to calm you down, can begin to take you out of the mindset of whatever is filling your head at that moment and take you back into that which is actually you. We are actually peace. We are actually calm. We are actually very neutral. And we've only been imprinted by the experiences, whether they be good or bad, but especially the ones that are traumatic. We've been imprinted by those, and they begin to not only alter our activities, alter our behavior, but they also alter our DNA. So when we go into ceremony, or if we go into any type of a healing session that's connected with tradition, we're trying to naturally bring that back into balance. The body has the knowledge to heal itself, but it needs help.
That's deep. The body has the power to heal itself, but it needs the knowledge to heal itself, but it needs help. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So then can you talk about the different patterns or even the different time signatures? So we talked about 6/8, for example. Is one pattern or one time signature more effective or evoke something that's different than another? Like, I don't know, if you're trying to calm yourself from an anxiety attack, or are the patterns related? I guess what I'm asking, are the patterns and the time signatures related to specific areas of trauma or specific things that are that affect us?
So basically what it is the specific patterns and specific rhythms are related to specific Vodou or specific spirits. Now those Vodou, they basically govern different aspects of the spiritual body, the emotional body, the mental body, and of course the physical body. So when we're trying to affect certain areas, whether we have some physical, imbalance or physical ailment, or whether we have discord in our waking lives, we still see that as illness. We still see that as an imbalance. So when we begin to drum these rhythms for those particular spirits, we bring them about, and then that naturally restores the balance in the body. And I'm not talking about, summoning up, some monster from the ground or anything. We're talking about something that's naturally in you. If you are of African descent, it is naturally in you, whether you know it or not, whether you have acknowledged it or not, or whether the people before you have acknowledged and practiced or not. It resides in your blood. So it is an immediate way to get to you and not only penetrate the trauma that you've already experienced, but it also goes back through the ancestral trauma that you may not even be cognitive of.
Okay, and that goes, so the patterns, and that also would go for the time signatures too? Or do we find like everything is in, I don't know, 6/8 or 4/4 time? We talked about 6/8, 4/4 is when you have 4 beats in a measure and then it repeats itself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Are the time signatures also related to a particular spirit or not necessarily?
They are. Yeah, they are. So now there are many rhythms in 4/4 within Voodoo, and there are many different rhythms in 6/8. Now the difference is you're going to start to look at spirits, and you're going to Voodoo, and you're going to start to look at them from the point of view of elements. So you have water spirits, you have very earthy spirits, you have air spirits, you have fiery spirits. So all of those things correspond to something. Now, it doesn't mean that, we're talking about just representation here. We don't really, in Voodoo, we don't really say, oh, well, this thing represents that or that represents this. No, we say this thing is that, because we recognize that all of this different energy is a part of that one main energy. So, for instance, there is a drum pattern for Ogu and Ananu, which is they're more fiery. They correspond with war. They correspond with metal. They have a 4/4 rhythm, and it is probably more likened to like a military type rhythm. It's a little bit more upbeat. I mean, when you hear it, you kind of just want to sit up in your seat. It's not a relaxing rhythm at all, but it's not all the time that we have cause for relaxation. Some things require immediate action. Some things require speed. Some things, a person may be too far into a watery element or an earth element that they just can't get in motion. So sometimes we need something to make us straighten up, get up, move, do something immediate. And then other times, we might go to a 6/8, which is definitely it fits with a lot of our water voodoo. And then you have a more flowy rhythm, and some of them are, slow. Some of them can be quite fast. The dance can be very fast. Water is not always calm. Sometimes there are waves, sometimes there are many ripples, sometimes there's a mix of water and air, and it can become quite violent. So there's so many different ways that all of this can go. But the thing about voodoo is it's kind of like it acknowledges every different phenomenon that we can think of, and even those that we haven't thought of.
Yeah, you're touching on something that I've often thought about. As a musician, I know this to be true, but listening to you talk, it puts not only the subconscious and psychological, it not only puts it in that context, but it also, we're hearing the spiritual context of it. And so everybody here is probably going to know what I'm talking about. If you ever used to be out there in the world, if you ever used to be clubbing, you're not trying to listen to no jazz before you go to the club. You're going to throw on some Lil Boosie or something. You're going to get yourself hyped up. And what's so important, I think, about this conversation is, and a lot of times you see, if you were ever out there in that world, people going to the club and they listening to this stuff, somebody probably going to be fighting afterwards. And so this conversation is so important because now we're seeing, at least from the perspective of voodoo, how and why we get incensed in such a way to commit certain acts. So it's very important for us to understand what music, in particular, the rhythm and the beat, does to us, how it affects us, and what spirits are moving. There's that, and you can touch on that if you want. And also something I thought about as you were talking about. So when we're talking about, it seems like that this isn't a thing just for traumas, right? It seems like, I don't know, if I need a little pep in my step going into a job interview, I might want to channel some Ogu energy, or maybe listen to or drum in a way that excites me, so that I have this boost of confidence, this air and this feeling of victory, right?
Sure. So that's what it really means to understand your tradition. It's not, voodoo really isn't about manipulating everyone around you or cursing or hexing anyone. It's about understanding energy and learning how to utilize that information for your own benefit, so you can transform yourself. And in transforming yourself, you then transform the world around you. There's a lot of, in real voodoo, there's a lot of personal accountability. There's no such thing as going through your initiations and going through these processes without taking personal accountability. And that's why it's not an easy path. And many people, when they come to it, they may quickly walk away because that's not what they were expecting. They were not expecting to have to be in control of themselves. So as you mentioned, you talked about,
Can you pause there? Can you say that again? They were not expecting what?
They were not expecting to have to be in control of themselves,
That's
and
powerful.
A lot of times I tell people, because people come to me, oh, he did this, he said he was going to do this to me, she said she was going to do that. I said, how can they control you if they can't control their own temper? That's not a powerful person. So you don't have to worry about what they're going to do to you. They can't do anything for themselves, Now, when you mention the music, and I'm old, so I'm gonna make some old references, but
Okay.
Lil Boosie, and even if we go back to No Limit, when you think about all of that music was really up tempo. And even with No Limit, they had the insight to put on, camouflage, and they talked about going to war and everything. That's Ogun, Ogun and Ogu energy. That's Ananu energy. That's up tempo. And not only is it up tempo, it's aggressive. Soon as you hear it, the first thing you do, you start rocking your shoulders back and forth, and you're ready to go. and you don't even know why you have this energy. You're in your room, maybe you're getting dressed to go out and everything. And then before you know it, you're almost angry. And you're thinking about, nobody better not do this to me. Nobody better not bump into me. If I see such and such, he better not say nothing, and you don't even know why. But that music is now controlling you because you don't know your science. You don't know your spirituality. But if you did, you would know, hey, I'm already kind of not okay. Let me not put that on right now. Let me put on something calm. But then when I need to get going, maybe I need a boost of confidence because I want to go on this job interview and I'm feeling down about myself. Let me get ready for war. I got this, That's when you put it on. Maybe if you're already kind of upset and everything, maybe you need to go play some Sade. Maybe you need some water. Maybe you need some relaxation. Maybe you need some feminine energy, some waves to calm you down, to wash you. So when you really understand your tradition, sure, we have, all of the different things, the nuances of the tradition itself. But then you can step outside of tradition and you can just assess the world around you, and you can utilize your tradition to interpret what's happening, or to take what's happening and to use it for your benefit, or to take what's happening and transform something that nobody understands how to transform, and maybe didn't even know you had anything to do with it, but you knew how to put those elements together in a certain way and transmute the situation.
So that brings that's great. That brings up a good question though. So how does one go about protecting their energy when they have to be, like you said, you have to control yourself? So how can we go about protecting our own energy when we're out in the world and we can't control the energies around us? So let's say let's say I by choice, I'm a bartender, and maybe, it's the best I can do because I'm going to day school and, for whatever other obligations, everything else I have going on in my life, this is the only kind of work I can really do. I can only work overnight, so I need to work in a bar, but I really don't like all that kind of music like Arthur put in the chat, do what you want, but watch my shoes. And Chantel said, no, keep you buck. And so
Yeah.
I work in an environment where this is the kind of music that's being played, but it's not necessarily the type of music that I want to be endowed with, that I want to be influenced by.
Mm-hmm.
In those moments.
Number one, just the fact that you have the awareness that that's going on, you already have a head start on the situation. And the second thing is, as is the case when you initiate into Voodoo, you're doing constant self-work. So the first thing we do is we get you in touch with where you are now. You must confront those traumas. All of the things that trigger you, all of the things that we push to the back and we don't want to accept, or we don't want to relive, we don't want to think about, we don't want to remember, we have to come face to face with that. Because once we get a handle on that and we can really find placement for that, that's the first step into having control of yourself. So when something happens, even if you're in an environment and that music is playing and somebody gets kind of out of line with you, you don't really take it so personal because that has nothing to do with you. That has something to do with that person. Now, we don't have to let anybody beat up on us or, totally physically overpower us. We have to defend ourselves if that should happen. But just kind of the ways that people can come at us, they might say something that's a little off key, or they might do something that's a little off key. A lot of times you can get around that and you have that awareness. So this music is playing, there's a lot of alcohol going on, probably you see this group of people here and that group of people, they don't like each other. They probably came in just for this reason to start something. You can be very neutral because what's going on. You've already assessed everything that's going on around you. So you're not walking into it unaware. That's the most dangerous place to be, is unaware. Awareness is everything. We can even be in something crazy. We can, a lot of times they talk about TV programming you. Once you're aware, you can look at that and it has no effect on you because you're aware. You can't be programmed if you're aware. So that's the thing. First, we're dealing with traumas, and we're also aware, and that gets you the majority of the way.
Okay, so since this is kind of shifted, and I figured that it would, because again, drumming and Vodou are so very intricately actually, you probably can't have one without the other, right? In a manner of speaking. So since we're on that topic, I'm pretty sure most of us know the answer to this, but we would love to hear from an expert. How is it that this practice has become so demonized, and what we see on TV? What can you give us a little bit of the history? Because everything that I'm sure there's some people in here who had no idea that this is what Voodoo actually is. So can you talk to us a little bit about how we get the picture of the dolls being stabbed in needles, and how we want to hurt people, how we believe that people want to hurt people in the practice of Voodoo?
Okay, so we kind of already touched on a part of the reason why the tradition is demonized, but I'm going to kind of just elaborate on that and say something else about it. Number one, we talked about how, first it needed to be demonized for even us, because if Voodoo is a source of power, if our drumming, our dancing, our culture is a source of power and is a positive association of identity for us, that needs to be stripped away, because you cannot enslave a person who is empowered, self-empowered. You cannot enslave a person who knows who they are and where they came from. You cannot enslave a person who has a connection and understands how to communicate with the divine forces of nature, with the world around them. So that's the first thing. It had to be demonized for even us. So that's why you'll probably get no stronger opposition than to talk to another person of African descent about Voodoo. Many they don't want to hear it. They don't want to be open-minded. They don't, get away from me. I don't even want to hear what you got to say, because it's that ingrained. They did an excellent job with that. They fooled us. They confused us about ourselves. The second thing is, we have to look at the earliest publications, the earliest documentation, the earliest writings about our tradition. We didn't hear about this. We didn't learn these negative things from ourselves. We learned these negative things from those earliest publications. So the thing is, Louisiana had already been, French, it had already been Spanish, and now, it's American. So those early publications, that's just about the time when Louisiana had become a part of America. So most of those people writing in those early newspapers, those early publications, were white, male, and American. They have no context. And what's important about that is, when you have the French and the Spanish, there's at least a little bit of tolerance for African expression because of Catholicism. There's a little bit more expression, and that's why you can go to Latin America, and that's why you can go to the French Caribbean, and you can still see a generous amount of African expression, just like you do here. But when you go to the other parts of the United States, you don't see that at all, because you're talking about people who were Protestant and pushing Protestant on those of African descent. So there was no way to hide our practice under Catholic statutes. There was no way to burn candles. All of it was a sin for them. They didn't even like music in some cases. When you look at some of the early Protestant practices, they didn't even want music. So if you're looking at our tradition, and it's very lively, there's drums, we're moving, where it's not a problem to move our hips. We're joyous, and we are expressive people. When we feel something, we cry, we shout, we holler, we sing. We're very expressive people. Well, that was sinful to them. So that's the lens that they were looking through. So number one, the lens was, not even the appropriate lens to begin to explain this. But then two, there's also an agenda there. we can't have these empowered people that we need to keep down. If white supremacy is to work, we can't have these people understanding who they are, because then they can never be enslaved. Then they can never remain oppressed. They will have a connection to who they have always been since the beginning of time. And we can't have that happen.
Okay. Well, that's it for me. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to open up the floor for a couple of questions. If you want, you can put them in the chat. It looks like y'all been enjoying it. Y'all definitely be having fun with the material that we've been talking about. Some funny stuff.
You got me running my mouth.
It's been fantastic. And we got about 6 minutes before we start our L'Oktòb Creole. So if y'all have any questions, please do share them in the chat. Bien merci, Kalindah. C'était magnifique.
Yeah, c'était bien magnifique. Merci.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't nothing so far. I'll tell you what, where can if people are interested in learning more from you, I know that you do tours in New Orleans. How can they find out about the tours that you give?
Okay, well, let me just, is it okay for me to just say my number here? Is it?
If you're fine with that, yes.
Okay. My phone number is 504-256-5400. Also, my email address is Queen, Queen, Kalindah, KALINDAH @gmail.com. I am on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram and YouTube, Voodoo Queen Kalindah Laveaux. I have a few TikTok videos, but my TikTok account is kind of insignificant. So you can contact me any of those ways. I don't really consider them to be tours. I call them experiences, because we do so much more than tour. I kind of mix ceremony with the walking, or the tour aspect of it. So I do that. They're private. So I do them for groups, or for even small groups. There's that. I also do spiritual work. I also do divination or readings. I also do music. I do dancing, but most people usually find me by way of, coming in to get a divination, or coming in to get some type of a spiritual work done,
Okay. So thank you for that. We have 2 questions in here, and I'll tell you, maybe we can give Jonathan, you think it's okay to give a 1-2 minute grace period, since I think this one started at 3:32 or whatever time it is over there. Yeah, 3:32.
Oh yeah,
maybe,
I think it's okay.
Okay, good. So these 2 questions will be the only ones that we take, or maybe we'll see if we can get to cues given the time we have. We got about 5 minutes. So the first question is, the song that was sung at the beginning of the movie was beautiful. Was it about water? So I think he's talking about. Are you talking about in the intro, Arthur? Because there was one which said "Nape don lo naye," and then there was the one where she was actually sitting at the drum. Talking about the very, very beginning one. Oh, Mama, yeah. So he's talking about the second one where you were actually playing, Mama Do.
Yes. Yeah. So that song was about water. If you know anything about, some forms of African spirituality, you may have heard the term Mami Wata. For us is Momodolo. And, that is not only one voodoo, but it's a family of voodoo. And so the song is to, call out to her, sing, dance, swim. It's like a way of, kind of egging her on or whatever. Because when she's happy, then she will bless us with prosperity. She will bless us with success. She will bless us with protection, because she's also a mother, So that's what the song is about.
Okay. The next question comes from Kweku. Do you find it hard to teach African American folks who have left the church with the trauma of the church?
I find it hard to teach everyone of African descent because even when it's you know, Creoles, usually we have some association with the church, or we have some association with any other religion other than our own. So it just depends on where the person is. I don't try to go out and recruit people or beg people to do this. People usually come to me. So at that point, you know, I want them to be receptive because they have asked. But even when a person is receptive, we have to go through and we have to see all of the different ways that we've been conditioned based on those other religions. You know, it's one thing to give up and say, you know, I'm not a Christian anymore, I don't go to church anymore. But you have to see, what does that mean to your whole mindset? What does that mean to how you interact with your family, how you interact on your job, how you interact, just how do you show up in this world? A lot of that is still conditioned by Christianity because it started with you so early on, or started with a person so early on. So I would say that's the part that makes it difficult, is because we're not aware of just how much it affects us.
Okay, thank you for that. And then our final question comes from Q. And Q writes, could Kalindah or anyone speak on their perspective? I think we'll leave it to her to answer this question. It's a good question. Speak on their perspective on the interrelationship between Creole traiteurs, Voodoo priests and or priestesses, and Hoodoo. Can you speak on the interrelationship between traiteurs, Voodoo priests / priestesses, and Hoodoo?
Okay, so the first thing we have to realize is that these terms Voodoo and Hoodoo have been redefined by people other than us. So there's been a major push ever since the movie Skeleton Key to define Hoodoo as basically a set of, you know, spiritual and magical practices that have nothing to do with the actual pantheon of spirits, or have nothing to do with an actual religious practice, and Voodoo being something that came from Haiti. Well, we don't have enough time, but none of that's it. When you look at, all I can say for now is, because we don't have as much time, when you look at what's happening in Louisiana, you have to look at the nations of people that were here. When I say nations of people, I mean the different African nations, or some people like to say African tribes. That's going to tell you what you had in any given place. So in Louisiana, you had Voodoo. And at some point, it became a touchy situation to be able to say the word Voodoo. Also, you know, that could get you killed at some point. You know, that was illegal at some point. And then later on, there's the major social stigma of saying, I practice Voodoo. Nobody was really doing that until now. Even when I was younger, it was still taboo. And I just became courageous just to be able to come out and say it. But nobody was doing that. And not without fault. It made your life difficult. So now we can go around and we can use these different terms. Traiteur is very accurate to what they do. They treat. They provide medicine. They provide treatments. Even when you go to West Africa, they don't just keep saying the word of the religion over and over. They will refer to somebody as what they do. Oh, well, they practice medicine. They're an herbalist. So we're doing the same thing here, and it's also easier to digest. So over time, you may have a person that is practicing this knowledge, but they may be saying Christian prayers. And that's because at some point, their ancestor understood that it was better for their survival if they knew the practice, but if they never said the name, that person could never be killed, could never be penalized, could never be in danger just because they're practicing Voodoo. So that is how intelligent and wonderful your ancestors are. They saved your tradition in a way that was safe for you.
Well, thank you so much, Kalindah. That was just personally, I think I probably speak for everybody when I say that was just fulfilling. Thank you for that wonderful discussion. And yeah, so again, please reach out, guys. She's giving you her number. She's a bold woman. And you got an email address. You even
I got that second phone now, so you know I can do that now.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. That was just everything that we could have hoped for. And so now I'll turn it back over to Radbois, Jonathan Meyer, who's going